Yes, Juan, you can start, right?
Bueno, hola a todos, bienvenidos a nuestro webinar sobre las tecnologías y cómo las tecnologías pueden ser implementadas para diferentes soluciones del cambio climático. Desde EcoRegistry estamos muy comprometidos con todos los actores de los mercados de carbono y de los mercados de activos ambientales en reconocer cómo a través de la tecnología podemos desarrollar mecanismos que realmente nos den esa integridad y esa tranquilidad de que las soluciones que se están implementando sí tengan un impacto real en el campo. Hoy hemos invitado a unas personas, a unas empresas que trabajan de la mano de la tecnología para poder apoyar en cómo se reconoce esa integridad y cómo a través del intercambio de información podemos generar mayor transparencia en los mercados de carbono. El webinar que les presentamos hoy lo vamos a realizar en inglés y posteriormente se puede activar la función de traducción que brinda YouTube. Bueno, primero vamos a presentar a Lars Koger de Allied Offset Partners. Yo voy a dejar que ellos presenten la empresa. La idea de este webinar es que ellos, cada uno presente la empresa y lo que hacen, pero Lars es uno de los fundadores y director de Allied Offset Partners y ha trabajado en muchas empresas relacionadas o ha tenido muchas comunicaciones relacionadas a temas de cambio climático. Nos acompaña también Cristina Calatayud de Silvera. Ella es la directora de toda la parte de ratings o de calificación, trabajando pues en procesos de innovación e implementando sistemas de analítica de datos para poder generar soluciones que realmente den cuenta de lo que está pasando en los proyectos. Lask Veil es el vicepresidente de Soluciones para el Desarrollo Sostenible de Chia Network. Lars tiene una gran experiencia en el desarrollo de plataformas y soluciones tecnológicas que se enfocan en el desarrollo sostenible y ha participado en el desarrollo de muchas de las más grandes actualmente. Y Finn, que nos acompaña de B0, él es el director de Policy, pues, que desarrolla políticas o relacionamiento con políticas públicas para poder lograr un mejor desarrollo de los procesos de rating a nivel internacional. Okay, now I'm going to turn to English. So please, I just introduce all of our guests for this webinar. So I will leave for the start first Lars Koger from Allied Offsets. So if you can introduce, please, what you do at Allied Offsets, what is Allied Offsets, and what are the services that you are providing for the integrity of carbon markets, and understanding more about the technology you use and everything that you can tell us. Please, Lars.
Great. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And I should start by apologizing for not speaking Spanish. That's a little poor. Actually, my university roommate was from Bolivia, and he tried for years and years to teach me, and it got me nowhere. So I hope he never sees this. So Allied Offsets, I have about 10 minutes, right, Juan? So I will share my screen while I talk, and then let's see here. And then what I'll do is just fly through a presentation. So let's see here. You should be able to see. Oh, well, there you go. I can't actually share my screen, so I'll just talk to what we do. All right. So Allied Offsets. Well, what we do is we're a database company. So we basically aggregate all the projects in the voluntary carbon credit space. So what that means is that we take data from, we have data from 18 registries and about 25,000 projects within those registries that we then aggregate. And on top of that, we have about 450, 500 projects from that are not within registries, that are typically newer technology solutions in what's called the CDR space. Within this, we aggregate the data and we find prices for the data, and we have the ability to compare the data in all sorts of ways. So for example, we'll be able to look at all the projects by a certain methodology, by a certain country, by registry, and by price factors. With we have partnership agreements with I think 6 ratings companies. So we also have the ratings for most projects that are rated, including I think a couple of my co-panelists here today. The data is typically used by a number of parties. A lot of traders use it, a lot of project managers use it, a fair number of academics and corporates use it. To this audience, I want to talk a little bit. It's a shame I can't share my screen. So tech on my end, I'm afraid. But I want to talk a little bit about how some project managers specifically find our data useful. So what we were recently asked by actually a friend of yours to do was to, they had a whole bunch of credits for a specific project that they wanted to sell to a bunch of corporates. So how do they go about doing that? Would typically be that they would have a broker or an intermediary of some sort. And one of the issues in this space, which is historically has been one of very, very poor transparency, is that the intermediaries, namely the brokers and the resellers, have charged a very large spread. So specifically what that means is the difference between what the project manager may sell a credit at, and the difference between that number and the number that a corporate buys from a broker is very different. So a project manager might sell a credit at $8 to an intermediary, who in turn sells this credit to a corporate at $10 per ton. What this specific project manager wanted to do was to find a way to approach these corporate end customers directly. And in order to do that, they needed help in finding out, well, given the type of project they had, what kind of corporates, well, specifically what kind of corporates might be interested in buying those credits, A, and B, were they talking, if they wanted to keep talking to the intermediaries, were they talking to the right intermediaries? So what we did is, because we literally have what we think is every single voluntary carbon credit project in the world, so I think, again, 25,000 or so, we can go in and say, well, given the credit, the project you're talking about, we can say, what are, say, the 12 or 15 projects that are most similar to your project. So what does most similar mean? It may mean the same registry, it might mean the similar methodology, it might mean same geography, it might be same quantity of credits. And then we select that list. So let's again say, we then show that list to the specific project manager, and we say, do you agree with this list? They may not have a view, but very often they do have a view, saying, we think we're similar to these 10 projects. What we then do is we say, for those 10 projects, here is specifically the list of people that have retired credits from those projects in the last year, in the last 5 years, and here's what we think they have paid. Oh, and here are their contact details. So as a project manager, this is immediately useful, because you'll now have a list. And again, if I could share my screen, I could show you the specific list for that we're doing for someone. But actually, please get in touch with us if you're interested in that on alliedoffsets.com. But you can very specifically say, well, here are 25 or 30 corporates that you can call up right now. And what you know about those corporates is that they're interested in what you're selling, as evidenced by the fact that they have bought it in the past. And we can even tell you roughly what we think you should be charging for your credits, or at least we can tell you what those credits have transacted at before. And we can say that, then we can explain you how this number will vary depending on the vintage of the credits you're selling and what quantity of credits you're selling. Now, if you don't want to do that, we can tell you what are the intermediaries in the past that have sold most to these corporates. And why that's useful is because if you go to someone, and in the example I used before, you might sell a credit at $8 and to someone who in turn will sell it on to a corporate client at $10. But the reason that they have to take such a large spread is because the tremendous risk they're taking with the credits and the huge discovery cost of finding the credits. But if you go to that same intermediary and say, I simply want you to sell the credits to these 25 clients that I know you have spoken to in the past, then they can charge a much, much lower amount for that because they're simply a non-risk taking intermediary, a non-risk taking broker. And all of this stuff we can borderline auto generate for you. So in other words, we're almost, not quite, but we're not miles from simply pushing a couple of buttons on some computers and we spit this out for you. So we don't really have to charge you much for doing it. So our cost that we've agreed with a couple of people so far is we charge you when you sell the credits and we only charge you in credits. So in other words, you don't have to send us any money. And that's incredibly enticing. And the cost of getting this data is, for any reasonable amount of credits sold, it's negligible. It's tiny. So that's very specifically a service that we offer to projects that are trying to lower the amount of money that they're spending in to intermediaries. Another service that we do to projects, and I'm very much talking about the service we do to the projects. We obviously do a lot of stuff to a lot of other folks, but another service to the project is as people are considering which projects to put together or what their projects are worth, we can do a similar thing, saying, well, our estimate would be that the price would be X, and these are the kind of people that would be interested in your credits. Again, very, very immediately useful. The final thing I'll mention just before my time is up is we also do a lot of stuff around alerts. So we've taken, I want to say, I always get this wrong, so don't hold me to it, but I want to say about 450 projects. We have drawn the maps of the projects. By the way, Juan, if you don't draw maps on your underlying project, you should go to jail. That's just criminal. How many projects don't draw their maps? Freaking amateurs, right? But anyhow, so we've drawn all the maps that didn't exist in the project design documents. And then we've overlaid that with all sorts of cool stuff, because once you have the data, it's pretty easy. So for example, are there currently fires in these projects? So we have all of this available for free. So if you want an alert, whenever there's a fire in a project or how many fires have there been in the last while, again, well, you don't have to get in touch. It's on our website. You can just sign up for these alerts. We're doing the same stuff around biodiversity. We're doing the same stuff around a lot of stuff. Anything you can put in a map, tell us, and we'll shove it in a map of your project details. So the point is, there's a lot of stuff here that you can do. You're not spending a lot of money. At least get the free stuff. And our whole, we're trying, like I think my co-panelists, we're all trying to use data for a greater good. And we all say the word transparency so much it makes it all want to vomit. But let's not say it. Let's just take some of this data and make it immediately useful. And if it's not immediately useful, I'd love to hear why not. And if it is, I'd love to sell you some stuff or buy something from you, but at least interact. So I'll leave it at that and be quiet. And I'm really sorry my data didn't work. If someone gets in touch with me, I can send you all these cool charts that one of my colleagues put together that I'll now have to tell them that I didn't even get to show. But thanks for that.
Perfect, and thank you very much, Lars. We will leave all the information about Allied Offsets and the contact on the description of this video. So for everybody who wants to access their information, that will be great. Also, we will do it for Silvera, Visero, and Chia Network as well. So actually, thank you very much. Very interesting conversation about specifically the information about how to get more efficiency in the market and how to get more value from the projects and recognizing. And thank you very much, because we have already drawn all the maps on our platform. So thanks. And the alert information is very important because then you see how the market is moving So for us, yeah, I'm actually subscribed to that, so it's very interesting. Thank you very
Yeah,
much, Lars.
thank you.
So then I will welcome our next speaker, Christina from Silvera. She has also very interesting things to talk about how they use data analytics in this process. So please, Christina.
Um, and I do speak Spanish, but I'm just gonna go ahead in English because I think that's smoother for me. So yeah, there it is, my transparency word in the title. But yeah, I'll be introducing Silvera and how we contribute to bring transparency to the carbon markets. So our main aim as a company is to directly support businesses with the information that they need to operate confidently in the market. Ultimately, though, we support the whole ecosystem, including project developers and other initiatives that, like us, are working hard to bring transparency to the carbon market, like the panelists today here. And I'm sure we are all together in this, that if we do this is because we really believe that the carbon credits are a very valuable key tool to tackle the climate crisis. But yeah, and we are aware that due to the bad press and accusations of greenwashing recently in the media, there's some fear and inaction among the buyers, but we also believe that this is largely because they didn't have the right information to support buying decisions. And that's why we exist. We want to provide rigorous and objective carbon credits ratings to support these decisions. With our ratings, our clients can find the best outcomes for their best value. They also find that they have a more defensible position, and this is result of the thorough and caring due diligence that they do with us. And this results in an increased trust. So in the past, it was acceptable to have a limited due diligence process when purchasing, when buying credits, because we didn't have the tools available. But now, because services like ours exist, and again, all the panelists here are offering these technologies precisely to support corporates, but also project developers and others in the market. So no more excuses. So our ratings go from AAA to D, which is a scale that is easily to communicate quality and risk. So AAA is the best. Spoiler, we don't have any AAA yet, and D is the lowest. So we also have introduced the provisionals, the Ps. So we have like negative, positive, and neutral scores. And we use this in cases where we just don't have enough information or data to perform a full assessment. But because we can still do certain parts, there's still a value to our clients, but also, also to highlight the fact that there is not enough information to do a full assessment. Often, though, these provisional ratings become full rating, and often is because of a result of the engagement with project developers. We were mentioning the maps. Sometimes the maps are not inaccurate. We would try to draw the maps ourselves, but it's also good to check with the project developers to confirm. There are also other times where there are like inconsistencies on the data or uncertainties, maybe around co-benefits. We just need like more data to do the full assessment. And if they provide that, we can complete it. So we take very seriously that engagement with project developers to make sure that they also agree and that we are not missing anything, and that we are, again, bringing a truly reflect on the quality of the project. So this is something very useful to have these ratings and this scale, because we can compare also across project types. So the way this is designed is like an A. In terms of quality would mean the same, independent if it's like an avoided deforestation project or a renewables project. So these ratings rely on deep project level assessment of three core pillars, so carbon, additionality, and permanence. Carbon is addressing how well the project is reporting, and depending on the project, we do this in a different way. Additionality is assessing if the project is truly result of the carbon credit revenues, and we also assess like if there are risks of overcrediting here. And permanence is assessing the risks of those emissions that have been avoided or removed, like maybe reverting back to the atmosphere. which is something like, as you know, we want to guarantee like a minimum permanence. And to note, and you probably have noticed, the co-benefits, so that the support that the projects do to the communities, but also the work towards biodiversity, is not included in the top level rating. And the reason is because we didn't want to, to confuse things. So there might be like a project that they are doing very good things towards communities and biodiversity, and we want to recognize that. We want to assess that. Our clients care a lot about the co-benefits, but they might not be related to the carbon performance. So we want our rating to be a truly reflection on the carbon. It's indeed a carbon credit, 1 ton of carbon being avoided or removed. And that's why we make the difference. So this is how our web app looks like. So as you can see, it enables you to quickly compare relevant projects, and you can, access to our depth of analysis for each rated project, drilling down into the detail of the analysis, but also stay at high level overview if you prefer that, precisely maybe for the comparison. So this GIF is already out of date. We are continually making improvements. So it's missing, like, for example, the proponent tab. So this was something that was developed because of client demand, really. They were very interested in knowing more about the project developer, the verification agency, the validator, everyone that was behind the project. And they wanted the capability, not just learning more, but also filtering to see like all the projects that belong to a project developer or verification agency. So we developed that among other things. So as you can see, buyers are able to make informed decision because we provide all that additional context and rationale for the assessment. And very fancy and cool charts as well, showing the results of the machine learning assessment. So you might be now wondering how is that we can deliver correct and comprehensive ratings when we were just saying that the market is generally a bit opaque and confusing. So the key to our approach is that we build project-specific type framework, that we have a complete comprehensive data extraction, that we reconstruct the project models, and that we test it with independent data. So we'll dive into that a bit more now. So on the first point, build project type specific frameworks. So we do this because although I was saying like it's nice to compare among other projects, we also believe that if we are going to be talking about quality, we need to be, capturing the nuances of the project. And you'll know that a renewable project and a biochar or avoiding reforestation are just very different. So we just need to go into the detail to capture risks and aspects of quality. So we build a framework for each type of project, and that takes a lot of time. That's my team, and I can tell you that we spend a lot of time, and we are a big team, quite multidisciplinary. And those also get peer-reviewed to test the project design, the carbon account, and impact claims to make sure that we are reflecting what matters. And so we started with nature-based credits because that was the largest category in the voluntary carbon market, and we've been moving into the more technology ones. So we are just launching now cookstoves, but yeah, we have various categories and more coming. Some of them are not like fully make it to framework. There are like white paper, like biochar, for example. We published a white paper recently, and this is because at the moment there was not enough data to do like a proper assessment of like a significant volume. So we are just like progressing our discussions with some project developers to gather more data, but also like, build internally the capacity as well to bring that forward with life cycle assessment and things like that. But yeah, ultimately the goal is to cover them all and rate all projects. So the numbers here relate more to projects that are issuing credits at the moment, but we are also moving to pre-issuance. So earlier stages also mostly driven by demand as well. That's a bit where the market is going. And there the interaction and the engagement with project developers is also like even more important. So the second, I said it was to conduct a complete comprehensive data extraction. So this is a bit in line with what Lars was saying. We take all the data from the project design documentations, PDDs, all the monitoring reports, and we extract it, we clean it, we organize it because that's just needed to analyze it properly. So also, if we build the shapefiles or the maps if they're not provided. So very important that the information is provided by registries and others in a clear and accurate way as well. The third point is to reconstruct the project model. So we've built proprietary models leveraging multi-data sources to assess the additionality and the business as usual scenario. So for example, for nature-based solution, we will rely more on remote sensing capabilities to validate the emissions reductions or removals. But for tech-based solutions, we rely more on our financial models to evaluate the project economics, as those are just like more critical to the quality. And the fourth, but definitely not less important, is to test with independent data. And here we really put a lot of resources in building teams to build proprietary technology. So in a way, we are, a big source of independent data when assessing these projects. Obviously, we then have like other third-party data as well to complement it. So we leverage advanced machine learning technology to this like a verified data together with ours to test the accuracy of the credit issuance and claims. And I wanted to bring here this example. It's one of my favorite because we can follow how the tree grow over time in a reforestation project. So you'll see like over time it changes from blue to yellowish, greenish as the tree grows, representing the canopy height. And I also wanted to mention a case study to highlight the work that our multiscalar LiDAR team are doing. So they are really scanning forests all over the world with LiDAR. So they get these like clouds that represent the trees. So we can really get like an accurate volume and therefore then carbon stock stored in forests. So really building a super accurate, the most, we say, accurate data set of carbon stocks in forests. And this will be published in a peer-reviewed paper soon. But something interesting is like they found out that generally traditional conventional methods have been underestimating the carbon stock in forest. And, if we want to do more accurate carbon accounting, it's important to bring these technologies if we really want to truly value the carbon sinks that we currently have today in our forests. And finally, just to highlight that we are not just a ratings agency. We have many products in the pipeline, all to improve the market. So for example, this is like a screenshot of our carbon credit analytics, which combines the most comprehensive data set of corporate carbon credit retirements. So also like to understand market dynamics, who's buying what, and so corporates can also benchmark across their peers. And because I'm running out of time, very quickly to finalize, just to say, like, you don't have to believe me, like, just take a look at the clients that we have. There are some of the largest buyers of credits in the market, and they're really like, looking for us to identify high quality carbon credits to meet their needs and to keep their position in the market. But yeah, that was me. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Cristina. Very interesting presentation. I will steal your phrase. Very good to hear about that. And also, there was an interesting question that I will. If the ratings have something to do with the price, that's something that we should analyze for the second part of this session. That will be very interesting. I will leave it at that. We will have it maybe some answers at the end. But for our next from Chia Network. Chia has been developing a massive platform for connecting actually different with us a little bit about that and his experience with different developments in registry systems around the world. So please.
Thanks, Juan. I think your connection is going in and out a little bit. Sarah, can you share the slides? Here we go. Thank you very much. So again, if you didn't hear from Juan, my name is Lars, and just like one of the fellow panelists, I am with the Chia Network. We are a company building blockchain technology, and my specific role at Chia is to see how we can use this blockchain technology to actually solve challenges in the carbon market. So not so much from a theoretical perspective, but much more from a practical perspective. What can we do with this technology? How can we use it? There's been a decent amount of initiatives related to blockchain and carbon. Some have been very focused on some of the challenges that are in the market. And while others have maybe had a bit of a different focus and therefore not necessarily been that successful or broadly adopted in the carbon market. I think if we just reflect a little bit on what Lars and Christina spoke about, a couple of themes that came out of their presentations were the quality of data, how the availability of data, maps, etc., and also the accessibility of data. The carbon market today is characterized by a lot of different siloed databases. And I would say, and Lars, who's a good friend of mine, may disagree, but I think the value that a company like Allied Offsets brings, and also rating agencies for that matter, is really how to evaluate projects, how to analyze data from projects, and how to put that together. So from a project developer perspective, investment perspective, trading perspective, you can get the insights you need. However, for all of them, in order for them to do that, there's a tremendous amount of the work behind the scenes of actually extracting that data and standardizing that data, because the carbon market as of today does not have those practices that you're familiar with from financial markets as an example, or commodity markets. So with that, if we think of some of the projects, some of the challenges in the carbon market, the cost it takes to develop projects, how do you incorporate sustainable development benefits with a carbon credit? How do you value that for a project? Or from a project development perspective, how do you get value out of the other benefits you provide? What's the validity of the carbon credits? The analysis that Christina just shared was really interesting on the forestry. We've obviously seen a lot of articles that are going the other direction, and probably on less credible data than what Silvera has. It's also an inaccessible market, right? And I think if you reflect on the history of the carbon market, it used to be a market with very few participants, often located in Europe or the United States, doing projects in many locations. The market now, where the market is going, is many participants everywhere in the world doing projects everywhere. And the market needs to reflect that and become much more accessible from a product development standpoint, trading perspective, financing, and so forth. EcoRegistry is actually leading the charge of some of that, and to their credit. There's obviously a tremendous need to scale the market. And the final point, and I'll just emphasize the final point because that'll kind of be my example for the presentation, is there's a need for international coordination among the different institutions that drive some of the kind of fundamental value of the market, specifically such as standards and registries, and increasingly the role of countries in that. And so we'll take a look at one example of that related to what we've done at Chia. So just a couple of concepts from blockchain, and I think maybe the key message I will come with from this presentation is that yes, I work at Chia Network. I think the Chia blockchain is a tremendous tool to solve a lot of problems, but that's what it is. It is a tool to solve problems. The solution is broader than just the technology that's being applied. If you think of some of the key blockchain concepts that are worth just reflecting on as it relates to the carbon market, immutability and transparency, right? So currently today, you can access data from most registries. You can see project data. You can see carbon credit data for specific projects. There's very little immutability to that data unless you actually download your own version, your own copy of the data they have. It is a limited set of data that is transparent. That's the reason why companies like Allied Offsets and Silvera and B0, you know, they put a lot of data together that is not easily accessible. The other thing is, if you own a carbon credit today, what the one notable exception being EcoRegistry, but in most other standards and registries, you have a login to a database. If that login to that database disappears tomorrow, what do you actually have, right? The idea of a blockchain is that you actually have, for the first time, a true digital asset, which means you can have true ownership of it. So even if a given standard doesn't exist anymore, or a country shuts down a registry, you can actually still have that carbon credit or that digital asset. The value may be affected, but you still have true ownership of it in a wallet, so to speak. Trusted controls. Blockchain does not mean that it's just a free fall in the Wild West, as often has been thrown out. Standards can use blockchain technology to actually enforce control in a much more coherent and smarter way than it's done today. Examples include KYC, know your client, and similar. And finally, and I think maybe the most important for the audience today, is building blockchain solutions really is about enabling an open ecosystem. So what I mean by that is, the minute you have somewhat liberated a carbon credit from a proprietary database to more of an open ecosystem, you can have innovation drive that. So if and I don't think Lars minds, but if I can give an example, right? He mentioned the alerts earlier. If I have a given token in carbon credit or carbon token in my wallet, and I sign up for Lars's alerts, then whenever there's an alert related to something that's in my wallet, that's when I get it. If it's an alert related to something that's not in my wallet, I don't care and I don't get it, right? That kind of innovation can happen in an open ecosystem of blockchains. And it's not because Chia says it can happen or government says, it's because it's an open ecosystem you can build integrated solutions in. So I think those are some key things to think about from a blockchain perspective. Just a bit of background on Chia. It's a public utility blockchain. What does that mean? I work for Chia Network, which is a company. If we don't exist tomorrow, the Chia blockchain is still there. It's validated by about 100,000 different nodes across the world in pretty much every country, every continent except for Antarctica. It's open source applications. So as an example, what I'm presenting today is fully open source. You can find the code behind it. It's decentralized solutions. And our approach at Chia Network is really to find partners who are interested in solving, in this case, carbon market challenges, and help you develop those from a technology standpoint. So if we take a look at the example of Climate Action Data Trust, you may have heard this reference if you read kind of the carbon news, carbon policies, and similar. It used to be known as the Climate Warehouse. It's essentially an initiative of the World Bank, AIDA, and key carbon market stakeholders to create a platform to share carbon mitigation action data, or in other words, data related to carbon credits and carbon projects. The key principle behind it is that it's based on the Paris Agreement's bottom-up approach and peer-to-peer collaboration. So all the all the participants here, which is countries and private registries, so standards such as Vera, EcoRegistry, Carbono, and so forth, are essentially considered equal and want to remain sovereign of their data. So what has to be created here is some kind of common data model, and then a technology whereby each entity, each participant can publish their data, and then it can be accessed in a common format. And doing that in an environment where there may not be trust between the members, which is something that may come up when we're talking about 195 plus countries plus private registries. So that's the core ambition behind the Climate Action Data Trust. From a technology standpoint, and unfortunately it looks like this graphic didn't come through quite right, there is no single place where the data is stored. Each participant will publish their own data, and other folks can take that data and store it on their own machines, their own environments, and so forth. The blockchain is the one that secures the hashes. This secures the data, so I can tell if this data has changed since it was first published. So essentially, is it still valid data? I can see that full transaction history, right? And data can as such not disappear. The blockchain as such is behind the scenes, right? For me to use something like the Climate Action Data Trust, I don't necessarily see the blockchain. Similar to, I don't see the coding behind a website when I go to a given URL or a web address. But the security of the blockchain is what underpins the whole system that's set up. And I'm really curious to see how the next slide is going to come out. Not much better. Sarah, if you have a chance, we can maybe pull up the PDF instead that I sent over. If not, I can just go off these. Essentially, what you have here is the Climate Action Data Trust, which is how it works in practice. The graph, I'm essentially going to ignore the graph because it doesn't really make sense as it is. The idea is that each registry is their own node. And as such, they publish their data. When they publish their data, a hash is created on the blockchain. That hash will change as soon as a change is made to their data. So in the example we're trying to highlight here, and in this note, I should give a great deal of credit to EcoRegistry. EcoRegistry is the first registry that actually linked to the Climate Action Data Trust. And so they have their own data source, which is essentially the existing registry framework. They launched their version of the Climate Action Data Trust, and then that publishes it on the blockchain. And at that moment, the data is now publicly available, publicly secured, publicly immutable. As I mentioned before, it's accessible. So if you think about this from a usage standpoint, how can I use this data? Well, if you're Silvera, if you are Allied Offsets, this may be one of my data sources where I can pull data from. If your government is trying to figure out how we're going to trade carbon across borders, this may be what we rely on to make sure that when carbon, quote unquote, disappears from my account, that it goes to your account, and again, secured with a blockchain. If I'm a project developer, this may allow me some tools to actually do, figure out what projects are in my region from across all the standards in a fairly simple manner. Now, some of those services will be much better delivered by private entities such as Silvera, B0, and Allied Offsets, but some of the core data will be there from a transparency perspective and easily accessible to the public. If we move on, I think just a couple of quick notes, because I know I'm running short on time as well, and we have one more speaker. The prerequisites of using any blockchain or any type of technology is it has to be sustainable, it has to be secure, it has to be compliant. I can talk more about it. The Chia blockchain is all three things and much more. Finally, what's next? And this is where we're open to partnerships, things we're working on. Tokenization and custody. I mentioned the critical idea of true ownership. We're working on EcoRegistry with that, as well as many other standards currently. MRV, how do you do a better job in the measuring, reporting, and verification of carbon projects? Transparency around claims are some of the areas that we're focused on. So with that, let me end there and hand it off to the next presenter.
And actually very interesting hearing you talk about that technology is just a tool. So it's very important to recognize that, because right now we are hearing a lot of fuss about different technologies that try to push it as it were the solution to climate change, and actually technology is just a tool. So we need to use that tool for the specific purpose, and that's very important. And the international coordination that you are achieving with Chia Network and the CAT Trust is very important, so that every stakeholder needs to understand how to connect and how to interact with this amount of information that will be needed actually for us to have a more transparent market. So thank you very much. And yeah, for our next speaker, Finn from B0, and know is one rating agency also that is going to tell us about how they do it and what they are doing right now. So welcome, Finn, and thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you. I'm just uploading my slides. Can you see them?
Perfect.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I think it's a very important theme to discuss, and yeah, a great group that you've gotten together. I mean, it's quite interesting that we're talking about carbon credits, which are fundamentally a physical project based in a specific place in the earth, and many involving the natural world. So talking about data and market infrastructure can seem very, very abstract. I mean, blockchain is a tool to solve sort of modern digital challenges, and rating agencies are really tools for mature financial markets. But I think it's a sign that the market is scaling, and scaling to the size that we needed to address the climate challenge. And it's also quite interesting to me, how much the market has changed and our efforts to tackle climate change has changed in the last 15 years. So it's a really great theme, and yeah, I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to speak. I think the way that we view this challenge is as part of a broader environmental challenge, which is that carbon emissions and environmental externalities sit as a liability for the earth, for governments, and for companies. And it does sit on companies' balance sheets. But the problem is it's not a monetized liability in many cases. But over time, we expect it to be, and the voluntary carbon market is evidence of that. So our mission is to try and shine a light on these liabilities across environmental assets generally, and more fundamentally to better value nature. But we are focused on the carbon market currently, and that's where our main product is, and where we think the main challenge is. Fundamentally, as a rating agency, we rate carbon assets. So we look at individual projects and make an assessment of risk about those projects. As part of that, we look at a range of risks, which I will look at. We standardize information around it, and we scrutinize it. And then, similar to what the other speaker said, we also try and corroborate that with any other data sets, spatial data that's available to us. Fundamentally, we are partially a tech organization, partially a research organization, and it requires a lot of people to do that research and to get coverage across the market. So we've rated about 300 different projects across many different sector types, and that covers around half of the liquidity in the market. So we're the largest provider of ratings to the market, and that fundamentally requires a lot of people. So we have about 125 people who are now part of the organization in B0. So maybe just a recap on why we need rating agencies. I think, as many people know here, the historic approach for assessing carbon credits was a yes-no assessment. Whether or not you meet the threshold for delivering a project. And I think as the market scales, if we want it to scale, it has to become a more detailed assessment. The science is advancing quite rapidly, and we have more and more data over time to discover what works and what doesn't work. So what we say is we're trying to move away from the system we had, which is a binary system, one of yes or no, to something which is a spectrum of probabilities. Because I think, if you talk to a project developer, and if you talk to a scientist, if you talk to pretty much anybody in this sector, they will say, there's no such thing as a perfect project. There is risks associated with all of these projects, and I think the important thing we should do is to acknowledge it. And I think our belief is that unless we develop a more nuanced approach to how we build carbon credit projects and how we assess their carbon efficacy, then the market won't be able to grow, because it won't find enough buyers, and it won't be able to scale to the size that it can be and that it can be used to really tackle the climate crisis. So what is our rating? I mean, really it's sort of answering a very simple question. A carbon credit is supposed to reduce CO2 by 1 ton and we ask the question or give an opinion on the likelihood that that happens. So we have a scale for doing it, but really that's the sort of headline question. We give an opinion on the likelihood that a project actually delivers what it says it's going to deliver, whether that's CO2 avoided or CO2 removed. You know, the risk factors in these projects are quite well known, and there's a big sort of scientific base for that. There's more and more project data available to look at it. And these are some of the risk factors we look at. I think we're a little bit tight on time, so I won't go into these in detail, but I'd be happy to follow up if anyone's interested in discussing further. I think important for us, we have a number of criteria which have to be met for us to publish a rating. And the first is that there's an additionality test carried out. This is one of the key risk factors, so we'd like to see evidence of that. The second is that there is a sufficient amount of publicly available information. Now, a really important part, an important principle for the market, we believe, is that market participants need publicly available information to engage in this market. So what we're trying to do is increase transparency across the market, because again, we think this is an essential ingredient for growth. And of course, similar to a sort of financial auditing world, we would expect that there's some element of third-party verification on a project before we look at it. So that's another important criteria for us. It's, as I said, a resource-intensive process, a time-intensive process to carry out an assessment. It involves engagement with project developers about understanding the information available. I won't go into the detail in too much process, but we have information available that talks to that. We also have a program of engaging with project developers, and we're keen to reach out and learn more. And we really believe that the way to approach this market is collaborative and constructive. We're always trying to refine the way we work with people, and we're always, of course, drawing on the latest science, the latest evidence from the ground as to how we can improve our assessment and help the market to build information infrastructure over time. I'll just pull out one or two of these of the points in this slide. So we look at the entire voluntary carbon market. So we look at credits in multiple sectors. And as I mentioned, we have global coverage. So we're looking across the world and in all continents as well. There's a couple of slides here as well on our team. You know, crucially, the ratings and research part of B0 is obviously the largest team. Over half of our team are part of that. And the reason for that is the complexity of the projects. So we've hired a number of experts across different fields of environmental science, of finance, of policy, and other sectors as well. But given the time, I won't dwell on this too much. So very briefly, one of the things we do at B0 is actually publish our headline ratings online. Again, this is to service what we think is a demand from market participants to see more information available. Huge amount of people have subscribed to that. And I think it's important to remember that the reason that there is a demand for ratings is because buyers are looking for more information in the market. So we think that this is a piece of information infrastructure, a tool that will help the market to grow over time. And we're beginning to see that, which is really encouraging. You know, people subscribe to our platform to see our information, but we reach a huge part of the market through agreements with other organizations who purchase and sell credits or who host different forms of information. And of course, while we do publish our headline ratings, the detail of our analysis is only available to those who subscribe to our platform. And on there, you can find detailed, quantified, and qualitative information about each of the 300 projects, as well as a range of associated research and analysis that we conduct. And that's it. Hopefully that gives a couple of minutes for questions, but I'd be very happy to follow up with anyone as well. Feel free to reach out on this email.
Thank you very much, Finn. And I need to be honest with you, I'm very fan of the way that you present the ratings in different how should I say, degrees. It's like this round, this circle that goes in a bar. It's very interesting, and you have always a clear view of what is happening on the project. So I believe that's a very interesting resume for each one of the projects. So I have actually 3 questions that we got from the audience. Yeah, since we are almost out of time, I will give you all of you like 2 minutes to answer. You can pick any of the 3 questions or try to answer the 3 of them. But the first one is very important, is if there is a relationship between ratings and pricing of the carbon credits. That's very important. The other one, and we need to understand that lots of project developers are watching this webinar, so it's about there is a lot of information, satellite imaging, a lot of data that can be gathered from projects, but how do you manage with the reality on the field and things that cannot be addressed with data specifically? And also one very important is, I would resume it as connectivity. If you see that connectivity and sharing all this information will be one of the solutions to bring more transparency to the market. So let's start maybe the other way around, maybe with Finn and then Lars Vale and Christina, and by the end Lars Koyer. So
that seems only fair. So thank you very much. So the price question I'm very interested in, because it's one of the more slightly more complex piece of research we have done. And the economic basis of what we do is that price should be correlated to ratings. If you can do a good job at assessing ratings, and the science is good and the information you have is good, then that should be the case. But it also depends on market adoption. People need to be actually paying attention to it and not looking at other information to determine pricing. So we've done some analysis on this, and very encouragingly, while there was no relationship before we started, the relationship is strengthening over time. And we've also looked at different measures of liquidity in the market. So looking at the more trading that happens, actually, the stronger we find that relationship to be. So that's what I would say to that. But I mean, I think unless we can show that relationship exists, and something is wrong. Either ratings agencies aren't working correctly, or the market itself is not going to be able to scale to the extent that we want it to. And then maybe to talk about work on the ground. I mean, this is a very important question. It goes back to the point I made at the beginning. These are physical projects located in real areas, and it needs to be based on practical understanding as well as not just sort of desk-based research. I think, ultimately, we're trying to build a scalable model for the market. But, all of our experts have grounding in field research and have measured literally sort of thousands of trees. Our remote sensing ecologist, Camila, is now in Brazil doing some work with the research agency over there. Depending on the rains in June, she will be in the field. So it's constantly developing new research projects to verify information and understand practical challenges on the ground. We do have a factor in our assessment around information risk as well, and there are considerations for when a lack of information is relevant to the practicalities of different projects. That's a very quick answer to what is a good question, but a complicated one.
Perfect. Thank you. And Lars.
All right, I'll try and be quick and maybe address the latter two questions. So one, project developers, what are the tools for you? And two, connectivity. I think there's a huge need in the marketplace for better tools for project developers. How do you store your data? How do you generate your data? How do you structure your data? And the kind of solution that then allows you to structure that data in a way where you can do automated reporting to the standard or the registries. And I think that's an example of how a more open ecosystem for the carbon market can actually allow for that type of data to be generated and reported in a much more efficient manner. So I'll address those two just with that quick answer.
So I'll go next. So fully agree with the panelists. So just to add, I guess, on the price conversation, yeah, fully agree with Finn. Maybe to add that we've been observing there's like a price premium on the co-benefits, and that's perfectly fine. I think that's important as well to support those that do better or more in biodiversity and communities. But we need to also assure the integrity of the carbon. So that's a factor to consider. And the boots on the ground, I think, yeah, I fully agree with you. And I think we are not trying to, pretend that we can do what we cannot do. So it's all taking that into consideration and assessing what they do on the ground and relying on that. And who knows, maybe then partnerships and so on. So yeah, I think that's me. Lars?
All right. So I'll talk about price versus rating. So we had the benefits that we looked at 6 rating companies, and one of the issues, of course, they don't always agree. So like there can be a lot of projects where Christina and Finn violently disagree about a rating, and it's a little hard for someone to be like, well, who should I trust? But I think that's healthy, right? Because that creates the kind of dialogue you'd want. There is clearly not enough of a correlation between price and ratings, but when Finn and Christina eventually succeed in getting all this right, and I think they're both doing a fantastic job, that will be stronger. But also, what do you mean by price? It's such an easy thing to say. What is price? I mean, there is extremely weak pricing in this space. They're all over the place. Sometimes credit costs $2, sometimes it costs $30. Sometimes the same credit costs $2 and then costs $4. So what price are you talking about, right? So let's just be clear that even that's not clear. Then I want to say a lot of things. I hate this because we always talk transparency and boots on the ground and all that stuff, but like a lot of these projects are just not that big. So the credits they sell are not worth that much. And if you got to send people halfway around the world to go into a jungle and do all this stuff, it's not cheap. So let's not exaggerate what we can actually do here economically speaking. And that's before that you accept that 4 ratings companies are doing or should be doing it. The verifiers should be doing it. The original PPDs should be doing it. So let's not pretend that this is easy. It's not. So let's also not say transparency if we can actually do it economically, which I think in many cases we cannot. And let's just accept that. I want to finally say one thing about the SDGs and not to rain on anyone's parade, but like, I think there's a lot of crap in SDGs, right? In the co-benefits, because how do you really measure that, right? So you have 2 projects, let's say they're the same, sell the same number of credits, and they both say, we're doing great work in education, right? Okay, fine. What does that mean? That means that one project builds a school and the other tutors a kid on Friday afternoon. They're both doing education, but they're doing vastly, vastly different amounts. How do you measure that? Are you going to send someone into the forest to check that? You're not, right? So let's not kid ourselves here. So there is a limit to all this. A lot of it is not economical, and unless something changes dramatically, it just won't be. So kind of like accept what you have. Of course, the data should be better. The design document should not be a PDF. Like, what are people thinking? They should be searchable. We've digitized them all, right? But they should be searchable by anyone. And all this should be better information, but it's not free. So that's anyhow. Sorry to sound negative, but that's all it's saying.
No, actually, Lars, thank you very much, because it leaves me with a very interesting closing remark, and is actually from our EcoRegistry perspective, we receive a lot of information, we gather a lot of information from project developers, from communities, and we understand how difficult that is. And we also receive some information from the market, and everybody wants, like, the credits are the best, but with the lowest price, and that they have extra co-benefits. So what we're working on a lot is in actually developing some kind of key performance indicator that can actually level the projects a little bit, or that can can make them comparable in some specific items. That is very important. And the more information we gather, the best way we have to assess projects and more transparency that we get into the market. But that also costs a lot. And that's also something that people need to understand, that it costs a lot to develop all this infrastructure, to bring the information, to bring the technology, and to have everything clear. So and we all need to be aware of that, so that we are willing to invest in carbon credits or in nature-based solutions that are actually are actually giving some value. So, and yeah, that's actually how I want to close the webinar. So thank you very much. We're getting lots of comments about the quality of our group here, so I'm very happy getting all those comments. So thank you very much, all of you, and I wish you a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juan.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.